Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this public talk on ancient wisdom for modern life. And it's also an introduction to a retreat we're going to be doing this weekend. So thank you very much for inviting me. I'm a guest teacher at your center this weekend. So we're recording this from Kadampa Meditation Center, Washington, D.C. But I assume you're listening to this in your homes, wherever you are, and comfortable. Maybe you've got your cat and like a nice little cup of tea. Maybe you're in your pajamas, I don't know. But just settle in, make yourself relaxed. This weekend, we're going to be looking at the second week of the recent International Summer Festival teachings. So the International Summer Festival is kind of a very special event that in the New Kadampa tradition, we do every year at the end of July and early August. And this weekend, we're emphasizing the teachings that Genla Jampa gave, our Deputy Spiritual Director, in part 2 of the Summer Festival. So part 2 of the Summer Festival emphasized some special teachings on Atisha's advice from the heart, which is a very precious text within our tradition that give just sort of short pieces of very profound advice presented in a very simple way. So we're going to be looking at some of this advice and incorporating it into tonight and then also tomorrow and Sunday. Also, another part of the second week of the festival was we received the blessing empowerment of Arya Tara, Buddha Tara, or Green Tara. So she's a special deity that we rely upon in this tradition. She's the embodiment of wisdom, and she's known to be particularly swift. And so we'll learn a little bit about Tara practice and how to rely upon Tara in tomorrow's sessions as part of our retreat. So I wanted to just start by doing some basic breathing meditation, just so we can kind of settle our mind, let go of the day, the busyness of the day, and try to cultivate some kind of mental clarity. So we're going to do some breathing meditation now. And then I'd like us to also recite a traditional Buddhist prayer called the Liberating Prayer. So if you're new, if you've never been to events like this before, then just listen, just sit quietly. You don't have to participate. Those of you who've been around a lot, you probably know this prayer really well, maybe even by heart, so you can follow along as you see fit. So we'll do those preparations, and then we'll go on to look at tonight's topic, which is ancient wisdom for modern life. Okay, so we'll just start now with our breathing meditation. So first, just try to make sure you're sitting in a comfortable position. Where your body is still and at ease. To begin with, just set a very firm decision or intention to leave any distractions, busyness, or plans outside of the room. Think, this is my time to meditate. I won't spend it distracted or disturbed. Then turn your attention to your breathing. Try to become aware of the natural rhythm of your breath. Try to make an effort to follow each inhaled and exhaled breath. Now, more specifically, try to place your attention at the tip of your nostrils, where you'll notice some subtle sensations as you breathe. Try to concentrate at the tip of your nostrils on the subtle cooling and warming sensations as you inhale and as you exhale. If you can exclusively concentrate on the subtle sensations as you breathe, gradually distractions and disturbances will subside. Your mind will become less busy, less distracted or disturbed, more peaceful, spacious, and clear. at any point your mind wanders, just become aware that you're distracted. Make an effort to leave the distraction outside of the room and gradually bring your focus back to the subtle sensations as you breathe. The cooling and warming sensations at the tip of your nostrils as you breathe in and as you breathe out. In the last few moments of the meditation, just try to hold some feeling of inner peace or mental peace that comes from your concentration on your breath. Keeping some experience of this meditation on the breath with you, you can now gently relax your concentration, arise from your meditation, and we can go on to listen to or recite a brief prayer to Buddha, the source of the teachings we're about to hear.
O Blessed One, Shakyamuni Buddha, precious treasury of compassion, bestower of supreme inner peace, you who love all beings without exception, are the source of happiness and goodness, and you guide us through a liberating bath. Your body is a wish-fulfilling dream. Your speech is supreme purifying nectar, and your mind is refuge for all living beings. With folded hands I turn to you, supreme unchanging friend. I request from the depths of my heart, please give me the light of your wisdom to dispel the darkness of my mind, and to heal my mental continuum. Please nourish me with your goodness, that I in turn may nourish all beings with an unceasing banquet of delight. Through your compassionate intention, your blessings and virtuous deeds, and my strong wish to rely upon you. May all suffering quickly cease, and all happiness and joy be fulfilled, and may Holy Dharma flourish forevermore.
Okay, so I wanted to start this talk by addressing the first part of the title, Ancient Wisdom. And then the second half of the talk is going to be on For Modern Life, the second part of the title. I wanted to give a little history of the instructions that we're going to be looking at, just to create a little bit of a context. So obviously, I'm sure you're well aware, at least by this point, that this is Buddhist teachings, right? This is a Buddhist talk or the start of a Buddhist retreat. But, so we obviously understand that those teachings, this tradition, it dates back to historical Buddha, the founder of Buddhism in this world, who taught 2,600 years ago, gave 84,000 different teachings on the path to enlightenment. So this tradition is called the New Kadampa tradition. So we practice what's called Kadampa Buddhism. So I wanted to explain a little bit this term Kadampa, because this is really relevant to the text that we're going to be using as the basis for some of the meditations we'll do tonight, and then also tomorrow and the next day, the text, Atisha's Advice from the Heart. So there's a section in this book, Modern Buddhism, which maybe some of you have, that says, who are the Kadampas? Who are the Kadampas? So we kind of know what Buddhists are. Right? So what are Kadampa Buddhists? What is a Kadampa? So it says here, Ka refers to Buddha's teachings, and Dam refers to Atisha's instructions on Lam Rim, the stages of the path to enlightenment, also known as Kadam Lamrim. Kadam therefore refers to the union of Buddhist teachings and Atisha's instructions, and sincere practitioners of Kadam Lamrim are called Kadampas. Okay, so I just wanted to explain this a little bit more because I think it just creates a context that might be useful. So Kadampa is a type of Buddhism, like it's a way in which we practice all of Buddhist teachings. It's a way in which Buddhist teachings are presented. So Buddha taught 2,600 years ago, and then these teachings were passed from teacher to disciple or student, teacher to student in an unbroken lineage, to this present day. And along that lineage, there's some kind of key teachers that become very important within every Buddhist tradition, and obviously within this one, where the teachings are revitalized or regenerated. So Atisha was a very famous Indian Buddhist master who was renowned for not just his teachings, but his meditative experience. He's a very pure spiritual guide, very pure spiritual teacher, who'd received all of Buddhist teachings on Sutra and Tantra. And he, throughout India, taught. He was a very well-known spiritual guide, teacher. And at that particular time that Atisha was teaching, which was in the 9th century, there was no Buddhism in Tibet. In different points, there had been Buddhism in Tibet, but it had died out for various reasons. So at that particular time that Atisha was teaching, there was no Buddhism in Tibet. And there was a very special Buddhist king named King Yeshua, who, out of compassion for the Tibetan people, worked very hard to try to bring Buddhist teachings to Tibet. So he started to do this king, by sending, willing and enthusiastic Tibetans across the Himalayas into India, where they would learn Sanskrit and they would get Dharma teachings, Buddhist teachings, and translate them into Tibetan and bring them back, to Tibet. But fairly quickly, Yeshua realized that that wasn't enough. They needed someone to actually instruct them, to teach them. And all of these Tibetans who traveled to India, they often referred to the good qualities of Atisha. They'd often kind of rave about him, his spiritual teachings. So this king, hearing about Atisha, Yeshua, he developed a heartfelt wish, to invite Atisha to Tibet. And he endeavored to make this invitation. And he actually lost his life in the process. Like, you can read more of this story in Modern Buddhism. It tells the story in greater detail. But he actually lost his life in the process of trying to get conditions together to invite Atisha to come to Tibet. And his nephew, who took over for him, became King Zhengchobo. He went actually on King Yeshua's behalf and invited Atisha, who was in India at the time, to come to Tibet, told him of the king's wish, and he sacrificed his life for this request. And so Atisha agreed, and he traveled to Tibet, and he spent quite a long time teaching in Tibet. And at that time, this is where it's real relevant to us right now, because you're probably thinking, like, this is getting kind of boring, this like history lesson. Just hang in there, guys. Like, I'll get to the point relatively soon. So at the time that Atisha went to Tibet at the request of King Yeshua and Zhengchobo, the Tibetans were not unlike ourselves. Their minds were not unlike the minds of modern busy people, like how we feel about our mind. We commonly characterize it as being full, right? Full of busyness, full of inattentiveness, full of disturbance, negativity, anxieties, stresses. So that was actually very common at the same time in Tibet. People's minds were uncontrolled. It was very difficult to experience inner peace. So when Atisha arrived, they made a special request of Atisha. They said, will you please give teachings that are clear and that everyone can put into practice? So then what Atisha did in response to this specific request is he, taking into consideration the capacity of the Tibetans, he taught Buddha's teachings in a very exceptionally clear way. And he presented all of Buddha's teachings in this step-by-step path that became known as the stages of the path to enlightenment, or in Tibetan it was called Lamrim. We still call it Lamrim, just because it's easier to say than stages of the path to enlightenment. So Atisha presented all of Buddha's teachings in this step-by-step way, in which is very easy to meditate and practice them. So this is what became known as Kadampa Buddhism. So a Kadampa is someone who, remember, Dham means Atisha's presentation, and Ka refers to all of Buddha's teachings. So Pa means person. So Kadampa is a person who using Atisha's skill in presenting Buddha's teachings, puts all of Buddha's teachings into practice, not just in meditation, but also in daily life. So there's another meaning of Kadampas that we often find in different texts, which is a Kadampa is somebody who takes all of Buddha's teachings as personal advice and puts them into practice. Personal advice and puts them into practice. So what this means is we don't just hear a teaching and think, oh, that's kind of fascinating. You know, like on a cerebral level, we're like fascinated. It's like brain candy, Buddhist philosophy or psychology. Or we don't think, oh, you know, that's a really relevant teaching for my friends, right? Like I need to tell them about that. Like they should really practice that teaching. So the way Kadampas emphasize Buddhist practice is they emphasize when they hear a teaching, thinking it's personal, or thinking, how is it personal? How is this for me? How can I do this? And then we put it into practice in meditation, but also more importantly in the meditation break, which is most of our life. Most of our time is spent in meditation break. So this is also a hallmark or a meaning of Kadampas. Kadampas are people who take all of Buddha's teachings as personal advice and put them into practice. So Geshe-la, the founder of the New Kadampa tradition, he's often said that that this type of Buddhism, this type of practice of Buddhism, is so ideal for modern people. Like he said often when he first came to the West, he was always so impressed by, you know, Western people in this example, because he said they'd hear a teaching one day and they'd immediately be asking, how do I do this the next? Like we're always thinking, well, how do I do it? How do I do it? So he said, you know, Kadampa Buddhism is so well suited to modern people because we have this sort of tendency to hear something and want to practice it, want to try it, want to do it. So a few pages later in this chapter in the preliminary explanation, there's a paragraph I like very much that I wanted to read. It says here, in general, all Buddhist teachings, the Dharma, are very precious. But Kadam Dharma, or Lamrim, is a very special Buddha Dharma that is suitable for everyone without exception. The great master Dron Tompa said, Kadam Dharma is like a mala made of gold. So do you know what a mala is? You're not going to answer me because I'm looking at a camera. So a mala, it's like prayer beads. It's like a rosary. You know, so many religions use, you know, different kind of rosaries. In Buddhism, when we recite mantras with what's called a mala. It's usually got 108 beads. You know, you can count recitations of mantras or prayers, and it becomes very blessed. So Kadam Dharma, which is so suitable for everyone, is being likened to a golden mala, a mala made of golden beads. So he explains why. Just as everyone, even those who do not use a mala or prayer beads, would be happy to accept a gift of a gold mala because it is made of gold, in a similar way, everyone, even non-Buddhists, can receive benefit from Kadam Dharma. Right, so if I mean, you'd probably be suspect if I did this to you, but like say I came up to you and I offered you a gold mala, like a rosary, prayer rosary beads that were made of gold. You'd probably accept it because you'd think, well, that's gold. Even if you never recite mantras or you have no need for a prayer rosary, you'd probably accept it because you think, well, it's made of gold. That's valuable. Even if you don't practice, using a mala, you'd accept it, right? Although you probably wonder, why is this nun giving me something so expensive? But anyway, the point here is with Drontompa's example, it's a good example. This is like this Dharma that we're going to be learning, Kadam Dharma. It's a way of presenting Buddhist teachings that's acceptable to everyone, regardless of whether Buddhist or non-Buddhist. I think everyone can see as we go through, for example, this weekend, and we're looking at the text on Atisha's advice, that there are pieces of advice that are relevant to everyone. Of course, they're relevant to Buddhists, but they're also relevant to people who are not Buddhists, who just appreciate good advice, who want to improve their inner peace, who want to better their own way of life, find solutions to their own problems. So this is a great analogy. This is why I wanted to read this paragraph. So Kadam Dharma is like a mala made of gold. Just as everyone, even those who do not use a mala or prayer beads, would be happy to accept a gift of a gold mala because it is made of gold. In a similar way, everyone, even non-Buddhists, can receive benefit from Kadam Dharma. This is because there is no difference between Kadam Dharma and people's everyday experience. So the way that Atisha so skillfully presented Buddhist teachings, it's very easy because it accords with our own experience. Like probably throughout, hopefully tonight, but definitely tomorrow, there's going to be many things that we hear from Atisha's advice from the heart that Genla Jampa gave teachings on the second week of the summer festival, that accords with our own experience. Like we hear it and we think, oh, that's true. That's so true. I know that's true. That's been my own experience. I don't know about you, but when I first started hearing Buddhist teachings, this is what I often felt. I thought, I wouldn't have thought of it myself, and I wouldn't have said it that way myself, but it immediately rang true to my own experience. And so it was very easy for me to accept many of Buddhist teachings right away. Even before I considered myself a Buddhist, I thought, oh, this is helpful. This is useful. Right away, I can make use of this. Even without studying or listening to Dharma, some people often come to similar conclusions as those explained in Kadam Dharma teachings through looking at newspapers or television and understanding the world situation. This is because Kadam Dharma accords with people's daily experience. It cannot be separated from daily life. Everyone needs it to make their lives happy and meaningful, to temporarily solve their human problems, and to enable them ultimately to find pure and everlasting happiness through controlling their anger, attachment, jealousy, and especially ignorance. So we're going to be, I've read this section, and we're going to be seeing if this is true or relevant to our own experience as we begin to look at Atisha's advice and going through some of the teachings that Genla Jampa gave on Atisha's advice, this special text. But I just thought it was important to kind of have a context of understanding what does Kadampa mean, so that we understand it's more of an approach. It's a way in which we practice Buddhist teachings, where we're seeing them as personal. We think this is for me, and we're wanting to put it into practice right away. So then Gyanla Jompa, at the very beginning of his teachings in the second week on Atisha's advice from the heart, he read the introduction to the text. So hopefully we have a context. So this is, Atisha's gone to Tibet now from India, and he's been teaching there for a while. So it says here, when Venerable Atisha came to Tibet, he first went to Nari, where he remained for 2 years, giving many teachings to the disciples of Zhengzheba, right? So this was the king's nephew. After 2 years had passed, he decided to return to India, and Zhengzheba requested him to give one last teaching before he left. Atisha replied that he had already given them all the advice they needed. But Zhengzheba persisted in his request, and so Atisha accepted and gave the following advice. Friends, since you already have great knowledge and clear understanding, whereas I am of no importance and have little wisdom, it is not suitable for you to request advice from me. However, because you, dear friends, whom I cherish from my heart, have requested me, I shall give you this essential advice from my inferior and childish mind. So this is how Atisha started this teaching. And Gyanla Jompa, he explained that, that we can find many teachings within this. So one teaching is, it's so clear from Atisha's words that he's regarding Zhengzheba, the students there, as friends who he cherished from his heart, like his equals. Right? So even though he was a very high spiritual guide, very well known, very well loved, he always had and demonstrated humility. So we can learn a lot from that example. That this quality of humility we can always be inspired by, and Atisha sort of embodied this. Another element of this is a common kind of, we call it an internal rule in Buddhism, which is you never teach unless requested. So as it's saying here, Atisha was requested many times to give some final advice. So finally he accepted that request. But we can get a teaching from this because it's demonstrating something for us that we can maybe incorporate into our own way of life, which is, sometimes we have advice for people. We have a lot of advice we might have a really good advice for someone, right? But if they haven't asked for it, if they haven't requested our advice, what do we say? It's unsolicited advice sometimes. Then we need to like wait a second, So again, Atisha's sort of demonstrating this. So he didn't give this. Obviously, he could have given the advice that's being given in this special text, this special teaching he gave. At any point, this advice was in his heart. It was already there. But he only gave it when the time was right? When he was requested, when there was obviously people open to hearing that advice who would benefit from it. So the same way we can take a teaching from this personally. Okay, just because I have good advice, just because I have an opinion that I think is right, because of course it's right. Do we ever have wrong opinions? Not in our eyes, right? So we can think, okay, just because I have something I think I can offer advice-wise doesn't mean that it's the right time to give it. That we should wait until people are genuinely open, or it's been solicited, it's been invited, right? That's the time we can think, all right, maybe then I can share this advice, following Atisha's example. So Gyanla Jompa gave commentary to a number of the verses within this text that we're going to look at in the next couple of days. But I wanted to focus tonight on one in particular that emphasizes this practice of taking the teachings as personal advice and putting them into practice. It's what we call a union of daily life and Lemrim, where we try to take our daily activities and transform them into the spiritual path. So Gyanla Jompa gave a very beautiful teaching in this that I wanted to read from tonight, based upon one of the verses from Atisha's advice from the heart. Okay, So the verse that Genla Jampa referred to is actually kind of midway into the actual text itself. Like it's not at the beginning. We're kind of jumping ahead a little bit. So it says here, it's about 5 verses down if you are familiar with the text. It says, since you cannot become a Buddha merely by understanding Dharma, practice earnestly with understanding. So again, it's this theme, like we practice the Dharma we've heard. So it says, since you cannot become a Buddha, this is Atisha's advice, merely by understanding Dharma, practice earnestly with understanding. So just understanding a teaching doesn't mean we're experiencing it. This is, I think, this is why I wanted to pick on this tonight, because I think it's just such a practical point overall. Like we can all appreciate this, because I think as a society, we have like a baseline of being educated. You know, we're very fortunate that way. We have like a baseline of everyone having some basic level of education. So by the world standards, we're educated people. You know, even if we don't think, oh, I'm not higher, I don't have a higher education, we still have an education. We're educated people. And then as a result, we can understand things, right? We can get something, like we can hear a Dharma teaching and we get it. We're like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. I comprehend it. And so we think, we can often think, maybe I'm assuming, and you can disagree if I am crossing a line, but I think a common problem we have is we can confuse an intellectual understanding of Dharma in particular, Buddha's teachings, with an experience. But they're not one and the same. So we can know Buddha's teachings, we can speak Buddha's teachings, we can comprehend them, we can debate them, we can discuss them. And that's all in an intellectual understanding. It doesn't necessarily mean we've tasted them. It doesn't mean necessarily we're coming from a place of experiencing them. So I think this is really important, because this confusion, I think, can be very common if we're not really honest and looking at our own mind, which was a common quality of the old Kadampas of Atisha's time. Geshe Lofton used to say one of the qualities of the old Kadampas was that they were very honest. They're very honest in examining their own mind and their own experience. So we need to have that kind of quality where we think, okay, yeah, I comprehend this, I get the concept, but am I practicing it? Am I incorporating it into my way of life, my way of thinking, my way of feeling, my way of viewing? My own intentions, are they changing in dependence upon this understanding? That's why it's saying practice earnestly with understanding. So we understand a concept, right? But then we need to practice it sincerely or earnestly, incorporate it into our own experience, see how it's relevant. Allow Buddhist teachings to actually touch our mind, touch our heart, transform it. So then we can transform our own experience of things. So Genla Jampa went on to give some commentary to this that I wanted to read, gave some examples of how we can do this, focusing on this verse. So again, he explained that this practice that's referred to in this verse is called bringing daily appearance into the spiritual path. So basically, we take our daily life experiences and we try to mix it with the spiritual path, like with the teaching we've heard or read that we've understood, so that the two are mutually supportive, right? There's not like the time we're listening to a teaching or the time we're meditating, and then there's like the rest of our life, like we say, the real world, right? They're compatible. We're bringing our understanding of Buddhist teachings into daily life experiences, bringing appearances into the spiritual path. So Genla Jampa said, we take Buddha's teachings as personal advice and use them as practical methods to solve our delusions, our disturbed states of mind. We try to unify our spiritual practice in our daily life. We try to apply effort to transform whatever appears to us into an object of lamrim contemplation and meditation. So basically, we see whatever it is that's happening in our life as a reflection, as a mirror of Dharma, as a mirror of Buddhist teachings, proving even further the point of Buddhist teachings or the truth of Buddhist teachings. So we're going to look at an actual example of this, so it doesn't seem so vague. So again, Lajampa went on, he said, it means transforming whatever appears into lamrim, an object of patience, renunciation, compassion, bodhicitta, correct view of emptiness. So there's some examples. So then Genla Jampa went on to use an example that I wanted us to focus on for the remainder of this class, because I think it was a very practical example we can all relate to, which is our normal experiences in daily life of sufferings, hardship, difficulties, problems, pain, right? Because we all encounter those. This is common human experience. So he used this as an example. And he said, normally, what happens when we encounter these things? You know, what happens when we encounter hardship? We're having to face something difficult. We're suffering in some way, mentally or physically. What happens? What's our reaction? So he said, normally, our reaction or our feeling is we're overwhelmed. You know, we have this reaction of feeling overwhelmed. We feel unhappy. We can get discouraged. We can feel depressed. We can develop anger or frustration. So these are very common reactions, right? So human life, hardships of human life, suffering of human life, and then very commonly our reaction to that is a mental reaction that actually produces more suffering if we check. You know, we react with discouragement, just reinforces that feeling of being overwhelmed or that pain. Or we react by getting frustrated or annoyed, angry, thinking this isn't fair. I don't want this. I don't need this. That's fine. Yeah, we can say that. That's true, but it's still there, isn't it? So that angry reaction doesn't help us. It just disturbs us all the more. Or we get depressed. We get really low. We feel it's impossible to kind of lift ourselves up to deal with that situation in a constructive way. We can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So these are very common reactions. So these are daily appearances, daily life experiences. How do we transform this into the spiritual path? How do we transform it into a path to peace? Because we don't normally think our suffering could ever be a path to peace. We don't normally think our hardship, our difficulties, our tough times could be a path to peace. So again, Lajampa said, actually, if we apply Buddhist teachings, we unify it with daily life, then we can actually practice earnestly with understanding. Remember, that was Atisha's advice. So we take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and we earnestly apply it, sincerely apply it to our experiences of suffering. So again, Lajampa gives an example of how we can do this. When we react to suffering by feeling overwhelmed, discouraged, unhappy, depressed, this shows that we're in conflict with life's difficulties. Why are we so shocked? Why do we think it's so unfair? So this is a very interesting question. So if we're going to change our mind, we have to start changing our mind. So we have to start thinking questioning a little bit our own mental reactions to something. So we face suffering, we suffer over our suffering. We face hardship, we suffer over our hardship. If we want to begin to change that experience, we have to start asking ourselves some questions. So again, Lajampa is asking a question, like, why don't we examine for a moment what's going on? So one thing that we can see is going on is we're personally, with that reaction, we're personally in conflict with life's difficulties. We're shocked. Like you're saying, why are we so shocked? But we are. When things happen to us that we don't like, that we don't want, that are unfair, that are hard, we react with shock. Like, why is this happening to me? How could this be happening to me? So again, Lajampa is saying, why do we think that? This is a really important line of thought to go down. Because we often have that reaction, why me, why me, why me? It's an interesting thing to turn that question around and think, why not me? Why not me? Why not me? Because anything that we're experiencing in our life that's problematic, probably we've experienced a version of before. And it's very likely we're going to experience something similar in the future. Like, it's a pretty rare a day that we face something that is completely unseen, that we've never even imagined before or heard of someone else experiencing before. So again, if we understand that life difficulties are common, they're not unnatural, doesn't mean they're wanted, right? But they still come, right? Then we can start to open up to thinking differently about them. So again, Lajampa, he continued, he said, we need to remember that we're in samsara. So in Buddhism, samsara means a rebirth in which we're vulnerable. We're always vulnerable to suffering. It's easy to create the causes for suffering, and we're constantly experiencing the effects of suffering. So if we're not experiencing suffering right now, it doesn't mean we're not vulnerable, right? This is what we call samsara. Its nature is suffering. So Buddhists aspire to escape samsara. So understanding we're in samsara doesn't mean we like, it leads us down a complacent path where we just sort of roll over and show our belly, put up the white flag, like, okay, I'm in samsara, so I'm just bound to suffer. So I'll just give up, right? That's not the point. The point is we need to understand where we are and sort of mature our mind beyond the childish view that thinks, I should never encounter these things. I should never have to deal with these things. Life shouldn't be hard. So that it's a really beautiful balance, I think we find within Buddha's teachings, where we can accept that it's normal that life is hard while still aspiring to a liberation from a state of suffering, a vulnerability to suffering. So again, Lajampa went on, he said, we need to remember we're in samsara, and its very nature is suffering and impurity. Of course things go wrong. It's entirely natural. So where he was leading us in this teaching was learning to accept sufferings that are unavoidable. Learning to accept sufferings that are unavoidable as a path to peace of mind. This is such amazing advice. If this is the only thing we ever take away from Buddha's teachings and we use it throughout our life, it's like a gem. It's like inner wealth we can carry with us through a number of situations. The ability to accept sufferings that are unavoidable. Understanding that there will be many sufferings we can't avoid. It doesn't mean we don't try. Of course, go for it, try. We all try, right? Every day we try to avoid sufferings, small and big, all the time. We design our whole life around, trying to manipulate externals to avoid discomfort now and in the future, to protect ourselves now and in the future, to avoid different types of suffering now and in the future. We're always doing this. Yet we're never successful fully, are we? Doesn't matter how hard we try. We still have problems in our life. Everyone does. So this indicates something. What Lajampa is pointing out is it indicates is we're in samsara. And it's the nature of samsara to encounter sufferings that are unavoidable. And accepting that is actually a path to peace. We would never think that that's a path to peace. So accepting, we need to be very clear what accepting means. It doesn't mean agreeing with. It doesn't mean we think we deserve it. It doesn't mean we stop aspiring to liberate ourselves from suffering. It just means when suffering's occurred, we accept it's occurred. We're not outraged. We're not shocked. We're not dismayed. We're not discouraged. We're not depressed. We think, well, yeah, of course, I'm a human being. So again, Lojampa in his teachings gave an example that I liked very much. So he was giving the example of if you live in a busy city. So me and Genla Lojampa, we've known each other a very long time. And we both started off at the Buddhist Center in Seattle. And then there was a period of time where both of us lived working in a Buddhist center in New York City. And so when he was giving this example during the summer festival teachings, I have very vivid memories of walking with Genla Lojampa in New York City, having this direct experience. So he was describing how, and maybe I'm embellishing this story. I feel like he was talking about like hot summer weather, but I don't know if he even said that. But he was talking about how if you're in a busy urban environment and you're walking with someone down the street and you smell a horrible smell, like it stinks terribly. And, you know, the person, you say something to the person you're with and they're like, oh yeah, you know, it's the sewer. You know, it's a city, there's a sewer, it smells. And just kind of like accept that and like move on with it. You don't think anything's wrong. You just think, well, yeah, it's a city. The sewer stinks. Of course it stinks. You accept it. You don't like it. And of course you try and move past it as fast as you can, but you're not shocked. You're not discouraged. You're not overwhelmed. You're not depressed. You just think, yeah, of course. What do you expect? The sewer stinks. So again, Lojampa used this example in the teachings of how, like, yeah, samsara stinks. Being a samsaric human being stinks. Of course it does. We experience suffering that's unavoidable. Others experience suffering that's unavoidable. Of course. So this is a way in which we can mentally accept, with the courage to face what's coming, not thinking it should be other than that. Not thinking that it ever would have been other than that. Not thinking that anyone's life is other than that. Sometimes we have this naive optimism, you know, that, you know, we can somehow avoid every hardship that every other human being has failed to avoid. Of course not. We're a human being. Part of the human experience, as we know, involves different types of suffering of body and mind. It can't be helped. It can't always be avoided. It doesn't mean what we think it means, though. Like, we think encountering difficulties, encountering hardships or sufferings will destroy me, will pummel me. When actually, if we use Buddhist teachings, our suffering can have many good qualities. From it, we can learn many valuable things. We can become wiser. We can become more compassionate, more loving, more patient. Actually, our suffering is often our best spiritual guide, source of our greatest strength. So why would we ever fear suffering, problems, hardship? So I think we can already begin to see how this way of practicing works. So we take a daily experience of hardship and we develop a completely different mental take on it, completely different mental position. And then as a result, we experience it differently. Like, if you think I can learn from this, if that's the mental position you take, I can learn from this, you're going to learn from it, aren't you? And you're going to come out better, wiser, more compassionate, more patient, more understanding. If you think I can't learn from this, this is going to destroy me, those thoughts will have power. And it will make that hardship all the more powerful. So again, Lojampa continued, he said, in this way we can learn to respond in a constructive, wise way, realizing that the real problem isn't physical pain, it isn't financial hardship, it isn't our relationships that are difficult, it's that we're in samsara, where this kind of experience is natural routine. Instead of being crushed by it, we can learn from it. So this is what we're trying to do. We're going to meditate on this in a moment. We're trying to use this ability to, we're learning, right? It's a practice. We're learning to accept sufferings that are unavoidable, thinking that the real problem we have isn't the situation itself, it's our reaction to it. That's what determines, like he says, whether we're crushed by it or we learn from it. We think it's just because I'm in samsara. So of course there's hardship. Of course there's difficulties. So one of the things I like, maybe you won't like this example, but I like this example, so I'm gonna share it anyway. It's like it's managing expectations. I think that's what this practice comes down to, is managing expectations. So say, for example, somebody wants a 5-star meal, right? Somebody wants a 5-star meal with multiple courses, Michelin rated or something, right? I don't know what I'm talking about. Clearly I don't eat out very much. But anyway, somebody's looking for that. But they walk into a fast food restaurant. They're not going to find it there, are they? Because that's not what they serve. So they could go up to, the person that takes the orders and say, hey, I'd like this Michelin rated 5-star 4-course meal by chef so-and-so. And the person would just laugh in their face, wouldn't they? Like, yeah, we don't serve that here. Right? And then, say the person leaves the fast food restaurant and they have this sort of like hope, like, well, maybe tomorrow. And they come back the next day, same place, same restaurant, asking for the same thing. And again, the staff, even if they've changed over, like it's a different crew, they're going to say, no, sorry, we don't serve that. We've never served that. We never will serve that. If that person kept coming back day after day, ordering this sort of 5-star meal in a fast food restaurant, pretty much people would think they were crazy, right? Because it's not possible. It's not what they serve. It's not personal. It's just not what's served. So nothing wrong with the wish. Nothing wrong with the wish at all. It's a great wish. 5-star, multiple course meal. There's nothing wrong. It's a beautiful wish. But that person would be going to the wrong place to fulfill that wish, right? So we're a little like this person. Like we keep going to samsaric things, expecting a freedom from all sufferings, problems, hardships, conflicts. And that's not what samsara serves. It never has served that. It never will serve that. We're looking in the wrong place. So we're looking at our life, our circumstances, our material possessions, our relationships, our position, and we're thinking, oh, this is going to give me permanent protection from sufferings, problem, and pain. This is going to give me a sense of security or self-esteem or self-worth, or this is going to give me an experience of fulfillment or happiness or satisfaction. So we're always looking in a place that can't be found. There's nothing wrong with what we're looking for. We're just looking in the wrong place. We're looking in samsaric places where that's not what's served. What's served in samsara is suffering. That's what's served. That's what we should expect there. Just like if we walk into a fast food restaurant, we're not shocked when we're served fast food. Usually that's why we go in there, right? That's what they serve. We don't expect anything else. So in the same way, while we're in samsara, even though, of course, the Buddhist objective is to escape, but while we're in samsara, we should expect to be served a samsaric palate. Like that we're going to be served samsara's best, right? Whole gamut of sufferings, starting with birth, aging, sickness, death, having to part from what we like, having to experience what we don't like, failing to satisfy our desires, just to name a few. Just to name a few. Those common human sufferings we don't escape from if we're in samsara. There's nothing wrong with wanting the happiness that is beyond samsara. That's actually the start of the spiritual path. Wanting a perfect happiness that's not fragile, that's enduring, is achievable. Wanting a freedom from suffering permanently is achievable. It just can't be found in samsara. It's going to be found inside, within the spiritual path. So if we start to, like I said at the beginning, it's like learning to manage our expectations. So here, this is what I think Genla Jampa's point was so helpful, is we learn to accept sufferings that are unavoidable because we think, I'm in samsara. What do I expect? That's what samsara serves. So then our mind stays at peace. We're not expecting not to encounter hardship. We're not expecting things to be easy. We're not expecting things to go our way. We'll notice that this practice, this view, actually leads us to a place of peace. We start to relax. We're less tense. We're less annoyed. We're less discouraged. We're less overwhelmed. So it's counterintuitive, but it's such a wisdom. It's such perfect advice if we put it into practice. So this is an example. We're going to do this meditation in a moment using Genla Jampa's teaching on this. But this is an example of how we take daily life experiences of hardship and suffering, difficulties and pain, and we transform it into the spiritual path, meaning a path to mental peace, where we train our mind in reacting to that appearance in a positive or constructive way that promotes inner peace. So if we practice in that way, will we ever be afraid of hardship? No, because we'll know how to use it. We'll make use of it. We'll be like, oh, this is great. I can keep deepening this experience that I'm building within. Keep deepening my renunciation, my patience from within. Because it's all about objectives, isn't it? I remember one of my cousin's children, he was, I think he was a freshman or a sophomore in high school, and he joined the football team. And the coach told him, that he had a lot of potential, but he wasn't strong enough. Like he really needed to work on building his strength. And so I remember after the season ended, and then I think it was getting close to like a summer break where he was kind of getting primed for tryouts again later in the summer, that he was really working on taking the coach's advice to heart and trying to build his strength. And so he was so happy when anything required heavy lifting. It was like the best summer ever, because anytime you wanted to move anything heavy, you just call him and he'd come right over really enthusiastically. Like you do a massive Costco run and you live 3 floors up and you need to unload the car, you just call him and he'd come over and very enthusiastically run carrying all the groceries up and down the stairs, like complete enthusiasm, because his objective was to get stronger. He wanted to get stronger. So any opportunity to increase his strength, he was really excited about. Because I wasn't interested in getting stronger. I wasn't enthusiastic about carrying groceries 3 flights upstairs or like moving furniture, right? Because I had different objectives. But to me, it was such a powerful example watching him. Is it a problem moving heavy things and lifting heavy things? Not if your objective is to get stronger. So same thing. If we start to look at our life and our hardships and difficulties through the lens of having a different objective, meaning, okay, I want to use these sufferings and learn from them. They're going to be part of my spiritual path. Then we can be enthusiastic when we encounter them. We won't be afraid or anxious when we encounter them. We're like, great, this is exactly what I was looking for. So I just want to finish with a quote that Genla Jampa shared, and then we'll try some meditation on this. So he quoted the great Buddhist master Milarepa. So the first sentence before this, it says, the time we spend listening to Dharma teachings or reading Dharma books is usually quite limited. But if we can recognize the Dharma lessons in everyday life, we will always be in the presence of our spiritual guide. As Milarepa said, I don't need to read books. Everything that appears to my mind is a Dharma book. All things confirm the truth of Buddha's teachings and increase my spiritual experience. So this is Milarepa's view. He practiced in this way, thinking all things confirm the truth of Buddha's teachings and increase my spiritual experience. So if we have that view, then it will increase our spiritual experience. It was because Milarepa saw everything as his spiritual teacher that he progressed very swiftly along the spiritual path and attained full enlightenment in that one lifetime. Okay, so we're going to try to use the example that Genla Jampa gave of our own experiences of difficulties in daily life and see in the space of our meditation if we can experiment with taking this teaching to heart, as seen as personal advice, this teaching, and mentally see, can I shift in my meditation, which is kind of like a safe place, like a dress rehearsal, right, for doing it in daily life. See if I can move my mind into the space of learning to accept the sufferings that are unavoidable. And then in that space of acceptance, there's some peace. There's some peace of mind. We're protected from being discouraged when we're facing life difficulties. We're protected from frustrations, depression, unhappiness. We can get some feeling for how this works in meditation. All right, so we're going to do some meditation now to finish. So once again, just try to make sure that you're sitting in a comfortable position where your back is straight but not tense. Try to gather all of your focus inwards. Recall the peaceful, clear mind you generated in the earlier breathing meditation. With this clear mind, we can then go on to engage in the practice of unifying our Dharma practice and daily life. This is where we take Buddha's teachings as personal advice and use them as practical methods to solve our daily problems. This is in reference to Atisha's advice. Since you cannot become a Buddha merely by understanding Dharma, practice earnestly with understanding. In our meditation, we can take an example of a daily suffering, problem, hardship, or difficulty. Take a few moments to just bring such an example to mind. with this situation in daily life where you experience hardship, difficulty, or suffering. You can try to apply Buddha's teachings on renunciation and patience. We can think to ourselves, why am I so shocked when I encounter these things? Why am I so surprised when I experience hardship or suffering? We can remember that we're in samsara, and its very nature is suffering and impurity. We can think to ourselves, of course, things go wrong. Of course, things are hard. It's entirely natural. By contemplating in this way, thinking, of course, things go wrong. Of course, things are hard. I'm in samsara, and samsara's very nature is suffering. Thinking in this way, we're learning to accept sufferings that are unavoidable instead of fighting against them. We're learning to respond in a constructive, wise way. When through our contemplation, we start to experience an acceptance of suffering that are unavoidable, we can hold this experience single-pointedly as our main object of meditation. In the final few moments of the meditation, we just try to see how, if we can practice learning to accept sufferings that are unavoidable instead of fighting against them, we can experience a greater peace of mind, even in the midst of a daily hardship or difficulty. Try to hold such an experience in the final few moments to become more deeply familiar with this practice. Maintaining some experience of this meditation with you, you can now gently relax your concentration and arise from your meditation. Okay. So again, we're trying to take Atisha's advice, which is practicing earnestly with understanding. That was the verse. And Genla Jampa's commentary on how we can bring Buddha's teachings into daily life, unifying Buddha's teachings with daily life. So here, we're trying to unify the teachings on patient acceptance, renunciation, acknowledging the nature of samsara as suffering, into our daily problems and pain, so as to develop a greater peace of mind. So again, we practice this. It's not like we just do it once and it's done, right? Got it. We practice. That's the whole point of unifying daily life and the spiritual teachings that we hear, right? Remember, Kadampa means taking Buddha's teachings as personal advice and then putting them into practice. So we can try the next time we're faced with a hardship, a suffering, a difficulty, to try to think about some of these points. Try to think, is this really so surprising? Is it really so unusual? Isn't it expected? I'm in samsara, and samsara's nature is suffering and purity. So we use it to deepen our understanding of the suffering nature of samsara, which is the foundation for minds like renunciation, the wish to attain nirvana. But also it deepens our experience of patience, where we learn to accept the suffering that's unavoidable instead of being in conflict with it, as Genla Jampa had said. Okay, so hopefully this was a useful introduction to both the retreat and the public talk. Hopefully you found some practical points from this. Those of you who are continuing tomorrow with the retreat, we're going to start in the very first session using the practice of Green Tara, Buddha Tara, liberation from sorrow. So we'll be doing the actual prayers to Tara in the first session because we have a little bit more time in the first session. The other 2 sessions tomorrow we won't. We'll do some meditations in conjunction with Tara, but we won't recite the actual prayers from liberation from sorrow. But we will in the first session. So if you have those prayers, then you might want to have them available for that first session. Okay, thank you.